What is up? Welcome to Mock It Like It Hot, Club Fantasy's weekly mock draft show, and we are ready to do another Dynasty startup. We've done the rookies. We did a little bit of best ball last week. We have not done a startup in a little while. I figured let's get these startups out of our bloodstream here while it's still May before we start getting into redraft season. We're gonna go one QB mock this time around because Josh suggested we do a one QB mock, and then it turned out we didn't need to do a one QB mock, but I had already created the draft as a one QB mock, so we're doing a one QB mock. Let's get into it. What is up? Good morning. Welcome to Mock It Like It's Hot, Club Fantasy's weekly mock draft show. I am your host, Ryan Weisse. With me, as always, Austin Amandolia. Austin, how are you on this fine Saturday morning?
I'm doing great. I love how you just pinned the one QB mock on Josh out the gate just to go ahead and get it out of the way. It's his fault. Blame him.
Yeah, it is his fault. And then, first of all, thank you to the 9 people, technically 8 people. We're supposed to have a guest. We'll get to that in a second. To the 8 people who joined the mock, but then the mock was filling up super slow this morning, Austin. And I don't like having a non-full mock. Normally, when I do a one QB mock, as you're aware, I do 12 teams because it makes more sense. It spread things out. We had to bump it down to a 10 team today because the room filled up so damn slow. So we need more people to get active on these Saturday mornings. But to be honest, you guys have been killing it. This just seems to be a bad week. It is a holiday weekend, so maybe that has something to do with it. You got any big plans for the weekend, Austin?
Yeah, I mean, maybe it's just people are watching Formula One qualifying at Monaco,
I saw
no spoilers.
Did you see? I think this is from this weekend. I saw this thing where this car stalled out going around this blind corner, and this car comes flying up on him, and it was showing the reaction time. This dude just weaved out of the way and did not slam in and kill himself and presumably this other driver because of their amazing reaction time. So that was pretty awesome.
Yeah, it's pretty wild. Lots of close calls this weekend, and I'm sure there'll continue being them throughout the weekend.
We got some people in the chat. Dame, good morning. Glad to have you here. Casey, I assume that was good morning, or it's just goo, one way or the other. But regardless, we're happy to have you here. And yes, Josh, it is your fault. So, guys, we're supposed to have a guest. I'm guessing either we got time zones confused or something came up. Dawson, if you're watching, get your ass in here as quickly as possible. I'm ready to bring you onto the show. We'll talk more about you later. But Austin, big news from the world of Club Fantasy. And somewhere there's a ticker Josh created for me, but we have so many banners. I don't know that I can even find it at this point.
Seems like you would have done that before the show,
You're right. I probably should have done that before the show, but let's actually get into the sponsorship. There is no banner in here, so Josh just lied to me. At least not a banner that I could find. Josh,
I can look for it while you talk.
Yeah, if you could find the banner, that'd be great. But more importantly, let's talk about what I'm actually talking about. We have partnered with Dynasty Nerds. We had Dynasty Nerds on the show a few weeks ago, and their core mission is to help grow the game of Dynasty, and we want to help them. We also want to save you some money. Dynasty Nerds is the longest standing Dynasty brand. They have a ton of tools to help you, including the Nerd Film Room, which gives you access to all 22 film on all of the incoming rookies, plus access to things like a trade calculator. And of course, they even host mock drafts. You know, that's what this show's all about. So if you go to dynastynerds.com or download the Dynasty Nerds mobile app and use the promo code Club Fantasy, you can receive 15% off of your order. Again, you're going to dominate your league mates. You're going to build an actual dynasty with Dynasty Nerds. Use promo code Club Fantasy and you will get 15% off of your order. I'm excited. Dynasty Nerds is such a cool product. Austin, where did you find that? Because I certainly did not see it anywhere.
It's in the folder literally called sponsorship tickers.
I don't have folders. I don't know what's going on. Oh, Josh is about to jump in and yell at me here.
Go to banners, not brands.
Okay, he's staying backstage.
This is
great. What chaos. Welcome to the family, Dynasty Nerds. I'm so glad we found it. Austin will show me where to locate that later on. But the long and short of it is, if you want to save on Dynasty Nerds, if you want to support the show, jump over there, use promo code Club Fantasy. I think there's actually a link, affiliate link in the description of this video as well. Austin, we've gotten past the stuff I'm bad at. Let's get into the stuff that I'm good at, because that was just a tragedy, my friends. Let's get this draft up on the screen. As mentioned, it is a 10-team, not 12, because we could not support 12 this week. A 10-team Dynasty startup mock draft. Austin has the first pick. I'm going to go ahead and start the draft, and then we'll talk a little bit about our drafters. So Austin starts this whole thing off. He's not going to auto pick. Josh is at the 2 spot. Our buddy Calvin Brokow is at the 3 spot. Faith jumps in and takes the 4 spot. Scampers at 5. Adumbi at 6. Dawson, who I'm waiting to jump into the show, is at 7. I'm going to guess something went wrong there, and it's going to be an auto pick. Dusty is at 8. Saywad, again, who's been hosting a ton of his own mock drafts, is over there at 9. And Gator Raiders, who, again, keeps the streak alive, has drafted with us every single draft this season. Gator Raiders is picking from the 10 spot. Austin, when we look at this draft, I want to start with the question. It's a 1 QB. It's PPR. We're only doing 15 rounds. We tell people all the time a real dynasty draft is much longer than 15 rounds, but we're trying to fit this show into an hour. But Austin, I want to start with the fact of, in a world full of Superflex, what are your thoughts on a 1 QB dynasty?
I feel mixed about it. It kind of depends on the league size. You alluded to this earlier, and we were talking to this before we started. When it's a 10-team league and it's one quarterback, it gets a little boring, because you might just hold on to your same quarterback for years and years and years, because the top 10 quarterbacks, they're pretty consistent. So that's kind of makes it a little less interesting, but it means you have to take a different strategy in your roster construction. When you get to that 12-team plus, I think it still is interesting, and it's a little bit different way, because then I think the value of an elite quarterback at that point is so much greater, because it keeps you from being kind of at that bottom end tier of the quarterback rankings of the quarterbacks, and then having to constantly fish for who is going to be that 10th to 12th best quarterback who can maybe pop up into the top 5.
Yeah, the quarterback talent is deep in the NFL. It's not 32 teams deep, but it's certainly 12 teams deep. And it kind of, I'm going to say it, you danced around it. It takes an element of fun away with a 10 team and one quarterback. And you mentioned you can hang on to the quarterback forever. There are things that come up, and this was not going to be my first topic, but it's, again, if you've watched this show for any period of time, you know that I do this show to make myself better at fantasy. Austin, is Justin Herbert dead? Because I thought I was going to be able to hold on to Justin Herbert forever in my 1 QB dynasty. And all of a sudden this offseason, I find myself buying some speculative quarterbacks. So what are your thoughts on Justin Herbert and this Harbaugh offense? And I'm losing the name of the offensive coordinator right now, but the guy who loves to run the football. What are your thoughts in this new offense with Justin Herbert?
Yeah, I think it's such a fascinating conversation. As you all likely know, I've been doing a lot of best ball. And so Justin Herbert is particularly interesting in best ball drafts right now, where he's he's QB 16 by ADP on Underdog Fantasy, which is freaking wild. I think
Greg Roman is the offensive coordinator. Thank you, Scampers. I blanked out.
There we go. I think he's a value right now. It's Justin Herbert. He's still they're still going to pass the ball, we're still in a passing league. I think people are maybe overreacting a little bit to Jim Harbaugh running the ball as much as he did while at Michigan. So I'm kind of holding. If I have Justin Herbert right now, I have him in a 12-team dynasty league right now as well. That one's a super flex, so I'm definitely holding on to him there. But I definitely I feel like kind of the hate has gotten too strong for him, and similar conversation I think can be had about Trevor Lawrence. So I think you're good to keep Justin Herbert. It makes sense to have some speculative ads just in case, but yeah.
We dealt with this Trevor Lawrence thing last year more than this year, because Trevor Lawrence kind of had a good year in 2023, but coming in, people were throwing the word bust around with Trevor Lawrence. He had been good, but he certainly hadn't been first overall pick, generational talent good. But I guess that could be the issue of over speculation, where we saw mediocre Trevor Lawrence, and now we're seeing better Trevor Lawrence with some stability. There might be a year of growing pains with Herbert, but we could see some growth out of Justin Herbert.
Yeah, and I think another thing that people have forgotten when it comes to Justin Herbert is he has been dealing with injuries for much of the past 2 seasons, and not just missing games for them, but playing through injuries. So he has been having to deal with a lot because that offensive line hasn't been good. He's been getting hit pretty hard. And so now I feel like I think the offensive line is going to take a step forward, and they're going to focus on protecting him, which gives him the chance to be more efficient than what he has been.
And I want to throw Scampers up on the screen here because there is an argument to be made that Lamar Jackson was a very good fantasy quarterback and an MVP NFL quarterback under Greg Romans, but Justin Herbert is not Lamar Jackson. And I wrote an article about Justin Herbert for Football Guys that'll be coming out eventually, and that was kind of the case I made. We've seen decent wheels on Justin Herbert, but we've not seen Lamar Jackson wheels. I just don't see a world where with Gus Edwards, J.K. Dobbins, Kamani Vidal. I don't see a world where they put all this money in running back and then they run Justin Herbert 100 times. Though I guess they had J.K. Dobbins and Gus Edwards when they ran Lamar Jackson 100 times. So I guess my argument shoots its own self in the foot, but just throwing it out there, I don't see a world where Justin Herbert is going to rush enough to make up for passing volume. It's going to need to be touchdowns.
Yeah, and I think I agree with that. I do also think if Justin Herbert's not throwing the ball 30 times a game, Greg Roman needs to be fired. I don't care what his
what a
track
wonderful
is.
point. Yeah.
It's Justin Herbert. He needs to be throwing the ball at least 30 times a game, and that might be enough for him, frankly. Especially where he's going in drafts right now, if he's getting 250 yards and 2 or 3 touchdowns a game, I think I feel pretty good about that.
So here's my issue with 30 times a game. I did the research for the article. I believe to this point in his career, Justin Herbert's career low in pass attempts is 595 attempts. 30 times a game is 510, which is going to be way lower than what we've seen of him in his career. So again, I'm just going to lean on if you believe there's going to be touchdowns. And that is something I do believe. I'm not going to give Justin Herbert the kiss of death. I don't love him in redraft this year, but in Dynasty, I love this kid, and I'm not ready to move on, but the speculative ads, as you pointed out, they felt like they needed to be made. I'll be honest. I was not even running a backup quarterback in that league. I had 0. Justin Herbert was my guy. When waivers came around or when his bye week came around, I grabbed somebody else. I figured it out every year for the last 2 years. This year, I have, I think, 3 backup quarterbacks because I'm like, I don't know. I don't know if he has the upside that I want to see him have. So. Austin, one of my questions was more dynasty based. The Justin Herbert thing just happened to come up because you brought up, not needing to hoard quarterbacks in a small league like this. When you do a startup, and I always like to point out to folks in a startup draft, there would be so many trades happening. Maybe not in this draft in a 10-team one quarterback. I don't know. People might just keep their pick, but certainly in Superflex, you see a ton of trades happening. You're not going to see that in a mock draft, but Austin, do you go into a mock deciding that I am going to win this year, I'm going to win 2024, or I'm going to wait and build a team that's going to be way better in 2025? Is there a point in the draft when you need to make that decision? Is it as early as the first round if you're going to take a guy like Christian McCaffrey or someone who's more viewed as a win now player?
Yeah. So I've been experimenting with different ways to approach startup drafts because as some of you may know by playing in Dynasty leagues with me, I haven't been that great at Dynasty historically. But I've decided to just start drafting teams that I like. And that's basically saying I'm trying to win now. Because I think for me, I'm not good at projecting what's going to happen in 2 or 3 seasons. Yeah. It's not my skill set. I'm not out here crunching a ton of numbers, watching a ton of film on guys. I do crunch numbers and watch film, but usually for different reasons than figuring out my dynasty prospects that I really want to target. So I've started just focusing on, let me draft a team that I like. And I will, every now and then, that means that I'll draft a player that is young that I think is going to be good for years to come. But it doesn't mean I am just taking a bunch of speculative youth targets that I think are going to cause me to win a league in 3 years.
And I think that's fair. I am notoriously win now. Josh and I are in a dynasty league where it's called discriminators versus ageist versus non-discriminators, where there are people like me who do not care how old a player is, but then there are the other half of the league where they only want the new hotness and the youngest guys. So I have like James Conner as one of my top running backs in that league because he produces, plain and simple. And that's how I've always built dynasty teams. However, I was in a really weird league last year, Austin, where we had, the league was in its 3rd year, but we did a new draft. We started the whole thing over, and I was kind of pissed because I had been so bad the year before. I had earned Bijan Robinson, and then they're like, oh, we're redrafting. And I'm like, you bastards, I wanted Bijan Robinson, but I guess none of it mattered. But regardless, So my first pick of the draft was Justin Jefferson. My second pick was Travis Kelce. I'm trying to win now. Travis Kelce is a win now pick. And then in the third round, I made this really weird decision. People started offering me future draft picks to trade back. And if you've ever played in a dynasty for me, that is not something I do. I'm on the other end of that deal every time. I accepted it. It was a pretty decent deal. I ended up with extra one, maybe an extra two. I don't even know what it was. And then someone else did the same thing for my next pick, and I accepted it. I walked out of that draft with 5 future first-round picks plus my own in a 10-team league. I had 6 of the first-round picks. Never done this before. I just accepted every trade that was sent my way. I was like, you said you've been experimenting with different ways to play Dynasty. I wanted to experiment. The problem was I still couldn't stop building my team to win now. So I still ended up taking guys like David Montgomery, James Conner, and I ended up making the playoffs. So I made the playoffs, had these 5 picks, ended up with the first pick of the draft, took Caleb Williams, but had enough firepower to trade up and get the second pick of the draft. So I walked out with Caleb and Marvin Harrison. You know, that brought a smile to my face, Austin. It's something I've been trying to pull off in every league I'm in this entire offseason. So it was weird that I changed my style, but I didn't, because I still ended up in the exact same spot as a middling playoff team, but I had a ton of draft capital for the next year. So that was fun. So I think in startups from this point forward, I will look to trade back instead of trading up, because that was a lot more fun.
Yeah, I think there's something to that. I think like having draft capital can be really advantageous for your team just in general. I don't think you should perpetually have draft capital. I feel like kind of like seeing it in 2 to 3 year windows where I have a ton of draft picks, then I get rid of them. And that's when I'm trying to compete. I like kind of having that back and forth mentality. It's what I've been doing in our dynasty, our club dynasty league right now, where basically I had 3 first round draft picks this year. I had the 1st, the 8th, and the 9th. Next year, I have 3 more first round draft picks. 3 draft picks that I think there's a good chance they're all top 5 picks.
Ooh.
And then the season after that, I have another 2 or 3. So my hope is that
you have mine. Are you saying that I'm going to be a top? Okay, I was saying you better not. I know I don't have it.
Coley's and Zach's are
they're terrible.
That I have. Yeah, their teams are rough. They're almost as rough as mine, you know. Not that it's a competition, but and then by the time that next year's draft is over, I'm about to auto pick because my sleeper app is behind. Here we go. I'm hoping that I'll be able to then use those draft picks that I have to trade for any additional players, any additional holes I have in my team, and then I can go from there and hopefully start competing for some actual wins.
Let me get to some of these comments first and foremost. Good morning, Wendy. How are you today? Welcome to Mock It Like It's Hot this Saturday morning. The Freak is happy to see his buddy Brocal. Brocal drafts with us all the time. Freak, if you want to start drafting with us, send us a DM. We'll start getting you some of these draft invites every week. We put them out on Twitter. And Mighty Booch? I don't know. But anyway, they wanted to know when the Scott Fishbowl Max are going to start. So the goal is to start them after scoring comes out. He dropped scoring in the early part of June last year. They should be coming out anytime. He said he was going to try to beat that this year, but he could drop it on June 6th and it would be 1 day earlier. So I'm not going to hold Scott to any weird standards at that point. But the Scott Fishbowl mocks, I believe, are going to be the last 3 weeks of June plus the first week of July. I was just talking to Austin about this. We will not have a show July 13th because Austin has something to do. And I'll be at the Scott Fishbowl live draft in New York City along with Josh and Faith. So July 13th, the show will be off. But essentially leading up to July 13th, the 4 shows leading up to that are all going to be Scott Fishbowl mocks for the crowd that is into Scott Fishbowl. But even if you're not into Scott Fishbowl, you should be into charity. You should be into fun fantasy football leagues. And it's a Superflex, so it still plays for some ADP value. So keep your eye out. The Scott Fishbowl drafts will be starting soon. I don't have any advice from you from the 4 spot yet because I don't know what the scoring is. Check back with us in a couple of weeks and we can talk a lot more about Scott Fishbowl. Austin, you inadvertently answered my next question. So Josh made CeeDee Lamb the thumbnail. And I always try to get the thumbnail early on in the show. And so my question was, is CeeDee Lamb your wide receiver 1? But you took Justin Jefferson. And guess what? The next question was, is Justin Jefferson downgraded because of his QB situation? So I guess what I really want to ask you, Austin, is let's talk CeeDee Lamb versus Justin Jefferson. Normally, I don't have you talk about your picks, but this is your show again. So talk to me about your pick. Why Justin Jefferson over CeeDee Lamb when CeeDee Lamb arguably could be better next year because their running game is older and worse?
Yeah, I mean, that's probably true, but it's Justin Jefferson. He's the best receiver in the league. Like, only reason he wasn't a top 5 fantasy receiver last year is because he was hurt, but he has shown more consistency than CeeDee Lamb. CeeDee Lamb, it took a while for him to really start to hit that top 5 receiver talent. I think, it's kind of a coin flip between them, honestly, right now, because they are both so good. But I'm still going to take Justin Jefferson. He's just so freaking talented. And he is a little bit younger than CeeDee Lamb. So there's some advantages there. I'm not worried about the quarterback situation. Nobody likes Kirk Cousins as a fantasy quarterback. And yet
Really
Kirk
good point.
Cousins has continued to feed Justin Jefferson and make him a viable top 5 receiver every year. I don't see why that changes, because the reason Justin Jefferson is such a good fantasy receiver is because he's such a good NFL receiver. I don't see this as a situation where it's one of these, downgraded players that you don't really want on your NFL team, but somehow pops in fantasy. Like, he's elite. He's going to be great. That said, if you want CeeDee Lamb with the first pick, go for it. For whatever reason, I trust Minnesota to feed Justin Jefferson more than I trust Dallas to do anything logical.
Do you see a situation? CeeDee Lamb's season last year is something to talk about. 181 targets, 135 catches, 1,749 yards, only 50 yards behind Tyreek Hill. And that has not been the earmark of CeeDee Lamb's game. Tyreek Hill is known as a yards per catch guy. CeeDee Lamb hasn't necessarily been that. 12 touchdowns. Do you see a situation? I'm not going to say Tony Pollard was great last year, but I have to think that Tony Pollard is probably better than the ghost of Ezekiel Elliott. Is there an issue where teams don't have to worry about the run game, and so it could actually get harder for CeeDee Lamb?
I don't. I actually see a couple of different things happening. I don't think 12 touchdowns is necessarily repeatable. I think he probably gets fewer touchdowns this year, which will downgrade him slightly, not that much. But I think more than anything, the fact that they have Ezekiel Elliott will take away red zone opportunities for CeeDee Lamb, because Elliott, he's a touchdown beast. If you're at the 3-yard line, he can fall into the end zone. Tony Pollard cannot fall into the end zone to save his life. Everybody remembers the iconic, he was like at the 1-inch line and couldn't just get it over. If that's Ezekiel Elliott, that's a touchdown 9 out of 10 times.
The statistics I remember looking up, I'm going to get them wrong, but not wildly wrong, is Tony Pollard had the second most touches in the red zone last year. I think McCaffrey was in the 50s. Pollard was at like 49, but Pollard only managed 5 touchdowns out of those touches. And I think you hit such a good point that probably led to more CeeDee Lamb touchdowns. Ezekiel Elliott ain't going to have problems in the red zone, plain and simple. Certainly not the Tony Pollard type of problems.
Yeah, exactly. And I think they're bringing in a guy like Ezekiel Elliott because he can take some of the volume, even if he can't have those super explosive runs that we really loved Tony Pollard for. I do think he can carry a bigger load overall than Tony Pollard. And so that means that they don't have to rely so heavily on being one-dimensional through the air.
Yeah, it's interesting because I'll have to go back and take a look at my rankings. I'm very reactive, and I think CeeDee Lamb I had pretty heads and tails above whoever I have at wide receiver too. I think it's Jamar Chase or Tyreek Hill at this point for my redraft rankings, not Dynasty. I think maybe I need to downgrade CeeDee Lamb a little bit. You put a really good point with the touchdowns that is going to be something that's heavily affected. And a guy who we don't talk about, and I kind of make this observation every single time we do one of these drafts, is Tyreek Hill. We talked a little bit earlier about deciding whether you're going to be win now or build for 2 to 3 years. Tyreek Hill, I don't think his ADP or the community looks at him as a win now. But there was a comment last year from Tyreek Hill that he is going to retire after this contract. And then there was something a few weeks ago that he wants to retire as a Miami Dolphin, but he didn't mention the contract specifically in that one. Is Tyreek Hill more risky than his ADP shows? In this draft, he went off the board as the 6th, 7th wide receiver in the middle of the second round. Should we be viewing him as more of a risky prospect, even though he's almost certainly going to help you win your league in 2024?
I think it's risky because because you only have one shot most likely to make this happen. Maybe he plays another couple of years, but it's one of those things where oftentimes when you do a win now strategy, you're setting up your roster that you actually have 2 or 3 years of winnable fantasy football before your players run out. Tyreek Hill, he's kind of on the low end of that, where this may be the only season you get, so you have to pick everything just right to maximize the win now. I think in this draft there was some auto drafting happening at the time, so
Yeah.
the team build he's on doesn't make a ton of sense for that win now. Like you have a ton of youth with Tyreek Hill surrounding it. Maybe Hill is what gets you over the top, but I do think you have to be particularly aggressive on the win now if you're going to be drafting Tyreek Hill.
Yeah, let's actually take a look at Adumbi's team. But actually, hold on. Let me recap the first 3 rounds because Adumbi actually had the next player that I want to talk about as well. So let me go ahead and recap these first 3 rounds. I always like to do a recap in the middle of the show, basically just to let you guys know where the draft stands in case you're just listening to the show. This is probably the only recap I'm going to do. If you've never watched Mock It Like It's Hot, I do not grade every team. It's just not something we do. Now, this show just being me and Austin, we may talk a little bit more about some of your teams, but more importantly, we're looking for ADP trends, interesting picks, things like that. So first couple of rounds, Justin Jefferson, Jamar Chase, CeeDee Lamb, Amon-Ra St. Brown, Bijan Robinson, Puka Nacua at 6, Christian McCaffrey at 7, Gibbs, Marvin Harrison, Breece Hall at 10. No real surprises there. Gator Raiders, I don't think was an auto pick at that point. I think he became an auto pick later. Our 7 pick is now in right now, and that's supposed to be our guest. Dawson, if you happen to be watching on YouTube, I forgot to drop the YouTube link in the draft chat. That's my bad. But anyway, feel free to jump on. We'll still more than happy to have you. Second round, AJ Brown, Garrett Wilson, Jonathan Taylor, Patrick Mahomes, Tyreek Hill, as we mentioned, Malik Neighbors, Brandon Ayuk, Drake London, Chris Olave, Sam Laporta, and then Josh Allen, Devonta Smith, Michael Pittman, Jalen Waddle, Roma Dunze, Devon Ashan, Travis Etienne, Nico Collins, Kenneth Walker, and DJ Moore round out the first 3 rounds. Couple of quarterbacks, 1 tight end, and then I don't want to say a more even split because there are more wide receivers than running backs, but the running backs went a little bit earlier. But as I mentioned before, Austin, I want to talk about Adumbi's team. So Puka Nacua, Tyreek Hill, Devon Ashan, DK Metcalf, James Cook, Anthony Richardson. You said you didn't feel like that this was necessarily a win now team. And I don't know that I disagree with you because we're going to talk about Anthony Richardson later. But is the fantasy world going too far on Puka Nacua right now? The 6th pick of this draft, the 5th wide receiver ahead of Breece Hall, Christian McCaffrey, Jahmyr Gibbs, and even Marvin Harrison. I love Puka, but I don't think that we've ever seen an ADP skyrocket like we have seen from Puka Nacua, an unknown last year, to the 6th pick of a dynasty startup draft.
Yeah, it's hard to argue with what he did last year. I don't know why. I can't bring myself to take him 6th. I think because even like Marvin Harrison, a guy like Marvin Harrison, I'd rather have a guy like AJ Brown that just got paid. I get the hype. I think for me, I tend to want to see more proof of concept. So I want to see 2 seasons of this instead of just like the 1 season. Because we know that Sean McVay, he can make someone really effective in his offense for a season. So it'll be interesting to see how that plays out again this year. But I always say, like, go with your gut. And if you think Puka Nacua is it, then take him. It does feel a little bit rich. I think a 1st round pick is still maybe worth it, but there are still other guys that I'm like, the talent is so clearly there for me that I would rather have them. Like Garrett Wilson's another one I'd probably be taking ahead of Puka Nacua. So it does feel rich to me, but I get it. I see the rationale.
So the 2 picks here that stand out to me are Tyreek Hill in the 2nd, and I'm starting to agree with you. I don't think that's the right pick when you look at how Adumbi has built the rest of their team. I don't know that Tyreek Hill fits this, especially when you look that Josh was able to get Chris Olave 5 picks later. Malik Neighbors was the next pick. It just seems like Adumbi is wanting to build this team young. Keon Coleman, Anthony Richardson later on, and then DK Metcalf along those same lines. So I just feel like this is kind of something we were talking about earlier in the show, Austin. It's something we've talked about with other dynasty analysts is your team should tell a story, and Adumbi's team is telling a very strange story right now because it's like you want to go young, but then you have Tyreek Hill, DK Metcalf, and most teams that want to go young won't touch a running back this early in the draft.
Yeah, that's like very true. That's also part of the reason I'm a little I would be scared off by this team. And honestly, this is frankly from having done a lot of these, this is a type of draft that I have been prone to do in the past where I will start out with a guy with a young player similar to Puka Nacua, and then I'll see a value fall like Tyreek Hill. And I'm like, oh, I have to go get Tyreek Hill because that value is
Yeah.
falling. And so it's why I've started to kind of shy away from like focusing too much on like young versus when now, and just focus on like, let me pick players that I like and kind of worry about the age curve and whatnot on a case by case basis.
And Josh calls himself out for doing the same sort of thing. He says sometimes you just have to take the value when it slaps him in the face. And I'm going to go over and highlight Josh's team. He mentioned he's got a younger build, but Devontae Adams fit in there at 6'9", the ninth pick of the sixth round. There was no way he could pass up Devontae Adams. And with his younger build, I tend to agree. But Austin, would a pick like Ladd McConkey or Brian Thomas or even Keon Coleman, the rookies who went in the next round, in Dynasty, do those rookies not hold more value than Devontae Adams? Is Josh holding on to maybe a redraft mindset going into this Dynasty draft?
I don't think so because of the way the rest of his draft is already gone. Like he's got Jamar Chase, Chris Olave, Devontae Smith, Jalen Hurts, Kyle Pitts, who I think Kyle Pitts is a value right now. And those five, that's a solid foundation for having a winnable team in the first year. So going ahead and having Devontae Adams set up, I mean, depending on
I set this up where you can actually start 6 wide receivers as well. So
yeah, so that's really solid. And there's still some really great running backs on the board. So the value is just falling. And I think sometimes you just have to take it in these dynasty leagues, in these startup drafts, whenever you see that the field is just really low on a player who can help you win in year one.
Austin, I want to pivot over to the quarterbacks because in a one quarterback league, while they are less interesting, seeing how they get drafted can be a little bit more interesting. And what I mean by that is Patrick Mahomes goes in the first round, but that was an auto pick, so we're not going to fret about that. So we're going to call the true first pick of this draft Josh Allen. Is this, and it was you, Austin, apparently we're not even going to need to do a recap of your draft at the end. Is this about where the elite quarterbacks should be going? And then more importantly, I love to ask this question in mock drafts. Hindsight is 2020. If you knew that Jalen Hurts wasn't going to go for 18 more picks, would you have taken Josh Allen at that 3-1?
Yes, I would have. Mostly because for me, Josh Allen, he's the perpetual number one quarterback in fantasy football. And so getting him in the third round after I've already gotten my receiver, I feel great about. And I feel pretty certain that I'll have a top 3 quarterback for the next 3 to 5 to 7 seasons. Like I don't worry about Josh Allen failing. He doesn't. He always seems to make it out as the QB1. And eventually that's going to probably bite me in the ass, but for now it hasn't. So for me, like I was probably either taking Josh Allen there or I'm waiting until around this time in the draft to start searching for that quarterback. I don't think I would have said, like, if Josh Allen had come off at the 2-9, I don't think I would have hit Jalen Hurts there. I would have said, okay, I'm just going to wait. But because it's Josh Allen and he's such a good fantasy football quarterback, I took him with that pick there.
Yeah, the gap here is what interests me the most is, so you took Allen at the 21st pick of the draft. Josh takes Jalen Hurts at the 39th pick of the draft. If my math is right, it is. And then we see an entire round almost with no quarterbacks. CJ Stroud goes at 5'10". CJ Stroud is kind of like the new hotness in fantasy football. And then you have another almost entire round before Caleb Williams goes. Now, the quarterback pool in the NFL right now, Austin, is young and talented, but is this the lowest value I think you and I have seen Caleb Williams in a dynasty? Are people just catching on that maybe we don't need to draft him so high?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's one of those things too, where it's like the more we talk about these guys, the more we find reasons to doubt them. It just seems to be like a narrative thing that happens all the time. I mean, even the fact that Lamar Jackson is going behind CJ Stroud is a little bit interesting to me in this draft. Now, maybe that was an auto pick, but like, I think what's happening is that people are starting to, they're starting to kind of question how sure of a thing we should think Caleb Williams is out the gate, which I think is fair. Like coming in as a rookie quarterback in the NFL is hard. So it's fair that he gets downgraded a bit. I think this is also a nature of it being a 10-team league where there are plenty of great quarterbacks still available. Like, weirdly, Joe Burrow still hasn't gone yet.
Oh my God. I didn't even notice that.
Yeah. Joe Burrow hasn't gone yet. Kyler Murray hasn't gone yet. Like, Dak Prescott's still out there. Trevor Lawrence. Like, there are so many quarterbacks out there that I think what you're seeing happen is there are some people that are just like, I'm not taking a quarterback for a really long time. And then it takes one person to have the faith that Caleb Williams is going to be great out the gate for him to go in the 6th round. And also look where Caleb Williams goes. He goes at the end of kind of a mini run of quarterbacks. You have Stroud, Jackson, Richardson, and Herbert go all within the span of 7 picks. Bro Cal may be thinking there, I might not get Caleb Williams if I don't take him now because there's this quarterback run going, so I'm going to snag him there.
If you needed further indictment of a 10-team 1 QB league, this draft board is the only evidence you need that this should not be your league setup. As Austin just mentioned, and he just went, and what a fucking snag by Scampers in the 9th round to get Joe Burrow after waiting on his quarterback. You have 2 teams who haven't drafted a quarterback yet. You have Joe Burrow, who obviously just went. You have Jaden Daniels, the 2nd quarterback taken in this previous draft. Kyler Murray, as Austin mentioned. You have Dak Prescott, who's older, but was also the QB2 in fantasy last year and has plenty of left in the tank. So this is the reason. Look at this draft board. This is why a 10-team 1 QB dynasty is boring and not fun. I don't normally league shame. I am league shaming the shit out of this fake league that we have right here.
Yeah,
go ahead.
I think it's so fair. And I think also the way that this board has fallen, like say Watt again, drafting out of the 9th spot. Does he need to take a quarterback? Do they need to take a quarterback until the 15th pick?
I hope they're paying attention, and I hope they wait until the 15th round just to show what that could look like. Why? I don't know if you're watching right now. I hope you are. Don't take a quarterback here. Yes. I'm watching on the little screen, so you guys might have known that already. I didn't know. So I am so happy to see how this build is going to look. Austin, I have been alluding to that I was ready to argue about a quarterback for 3 weeks now, and it's never fit into my show sheet. So I made sure I got it into this show sheet.
Oh dear.
And again, Adumbi. Adumbi is the star of today's show. Austin, can you sell me on Anthony Richardson? Are you sold on Anthony Richardson? I am concerned, not about Anthony Richardson. I am concerned about how the fantasy community has portrayed this man, that he can apparently walk on fucking water at this point, because I am seeing him perpetually ranked top 5, Austin, top 5. That is the kind of analysis that turns me into a hater. What are your thoughts on football Jesus, Anthony Richardson?
What do you mean? You have a problem with the fact that Anthony Richardson only stayed healthy in 2 of his first 4 starts, and he's the top 5, and Trey Lance was injured in week 2, and suddenly Brock Purdy's better than him, and we should never give Trey Lance a chance to step on a football field again? You think there's a double standard there or something?
Oh, a guy who completed, I think if I remember my stats correctly, 55% of his passes in college, and then only 59% last year. I understand the rushing upside, but Austin, you kind of also talked on the small sample size upside or extrapolation. It's extrapolation season on Twitter, to where I understand the guy scored 5 touchdowns in 2.5 games. Come on, man.
Yeah. So first off, I just realized that this is totally not related to this topic. But alluding to the player I'm about to take, I just realized that Sleeper has officially changed Marquise Brown's name to Hollywood.
Hollywood threw me all the way. I promise you, one of my leagues, I saw H Brown and was like, who the fuck is H Brown? I'm running through H names in my head. Is there an H name there's no Henry. There's no first name. I'm like, these players don't exist. I did not. Threw me all the way off. But yes, he is officially Hollywood. And it's interesting for my rankings. I had to leave Tank Dell as Nathaniel Dell for a lot last year, but now he's officially Tank Dell. So.
There you go. But getting back to Anthony Richardson, I'm with you. I don't like him going as the sixth quarterback off the board here. I get it. Like the rushing upside is very interesting. And I I see the vision there with it. It's just like it's one of those things where like we saw 2.5 games from him. I need to see a full season for me to spend that capital on him. Now, Odumbe has backed him up with Kyler Murray, and so I think that's interesting. But
Excellent.
it makes me curious, like how far would Anthony Richardson have fallen if Odumbe hadn't have taken him? Like, was this just like one person that was really high on him?
No, I was going to go the other way, Austin. I think that we're drafting with 10 weirdos that you guys all haven't drank the Kool-Aid yet. And let me be clear, I'm using that very loosely. I don't believe in the guy. I think I think he would have went earlier. I think we got lucky in this draft, and I'm worried of where he would have went if you guys weren't all rational, because I have seen some irrational takes on this guy.
Yeah, it depends. I will say it depends on your scoring settings too. Like if this were to be a 6-point passing touchdown league, there's no world in which Anthony Richardson should be going where he is. What I will say is if you are saying I want a rushing quarterback, period, then he should be ahead of CJ Stroud. Like if that's your standard that you want a dual threat quarterback, you almost have to put him in the top 5 because there's only 5 true dual threat quarterbacks.
I see what you're saying. So you're not saying like if you're saying if I'm walking into a draft saying I want a dual threat quarterback and I'm only ranking dual threat. Okay, because I'm like,
yeah.
Man.
I see that argument, but in terms of track record, like him going ahead of Herbert, Burrow, Kyler Murray, it just feels wrong.
Yeah. Before we get on to it, a couple of quick things. One, if you guys have never watched our show, I will eventually scroll the draft board. The top of the draft is the more interesting part of the draft. We'll talk about some of the late picks, and Austin will recap his entire draft. I also want to draw attention to the ticker at the bottom of the screen. We are now partnered with Dynasty Nerds. If you sign up today using promo code Club Fantasy, you will get 15% off of your membership. So check out Dynasty Nerds if you're trying to become a better Dynasty manager, and they're going to help you out with that. Austin, I wanted to pivot to tight ends, and Tyler happened to ask this question at the perfect time. Again, we're going to have no reason for you to recap your team at the end of the show, at least not the early part of your team. Tyler point blank said, why did Laporta go so high? So I want to kind of talk about the tight ends in general, because the tight ends, it's so interesting that tight ends and quarterbacks in Dynasty follow such an interestingly similar path. So Laporta goes 1. You got a full round and a half before Trey McBride goes 2. Kyle Pitts at 3, Brock Bowers, Mark Andrews, Dalton Kincaid. Kelsey doesn't go until the 7th round. So, Austin, I'm going to ask you literally word for word the exact same question I asked about Josh Allen. Would you have taken Laporta if you had known that Trey McBride wasn't going to go till 4.8, Kyle Pitts wasn't going to go till 5.2?
So no and maybe. I'm not huge on Trey McBride this year. I'm a little bit like, I feel like last year may have just been like he was the only dude there. He was the only guy on the team. Like basically it was Trey McBride, Kyler Murray, and a bunch of randos is the way I see Arizona Cardinals last year. They now have Marvin Harrison. There's going to be more competition for targets. They don't have to rely on him quite as much. So I do think he's going to kind of come down this year. Kyle Pitts going in the 5th round is a little bit more interesting to me. But I decided I wanted to go with I decided I wanted to get my tight end early. Now, I'm a little bit surprised more people didn't do it.
Yes,
but
me too.
So think I would have waited to the 5th round if I had known it, but I didn't know it at the time. So I took the bait. And I think Detroit's going to be really good this year.
Yeah.
I'm still sussed out about Atlanta. I just don't trust Atlanta. I think some of this too is my fandom. I've been like begging for Kyle Pitts to go off for years, and I can't keep doing it. So that's kind of part of what went into it. But if Laporta, it's similar with Josh Allen. If Laporta had already been gone at the 2.9, I probably would have waited a little bit to go ahead and probably would have waited a full turn to get my next tight end.
Yeah, it's Austin. I can easily say weirdest draft board we've ever had that I can recall on Mock It Like It's Hot, because we talked about the gap with the quarterbacks, And again, ignore Patrick Mahomes at the 2-4. That was an auto pick, and you can't really take that. But
Yeah.
every team has a tight end now. The last tight end went as the 11-6. That was Adumbi, the star of the show, was the last person to draft their tight end. My buddy Say Watt is still not taking a quarterback, at least to the last point I scrolled. So that's going to be interesting. But Austin, I think you hit a nail on the head that you don't know what you don't know at the 210. So with I'm going to throw the comment back up the screen with Tyler calling you out, why did he go so high? I would have expected Laporta in the third. I would have expected McBride, Bowers in the third, early fourth. So the weird draft board kind of makes you look silly, but you also, you said it so well. You don't know what you didn't know at the 210. You didn't know that it was going to fall like this. I know you're a big Travis Kelce guy, and your team is kind of built as a win now team.
Yeah,
if you knew you could have got Kelce 6 rounds later.
I was gonna say that's the real take here. It's not as much as Trey McBride and Kyle Pitts for me. It's the fact that Kelce went in the 7th round. If I'd known that, I definitely would have waited.
Yeah, it's a very interesting dynamic, and I'm going to be interested. This is our last 1 QB startup mock of the year. We are going to do a Superflex to end the year next week for startups, where we'll still be doing redraft. I'll be interested to see if this has become a trend with these tight ends, because Austin, this is not what we've seen literally this entire offseason. We have seen these tight ends go early. Normally I'm yelling at people for taking them early. We had Joel on one of our earliest shows, and he mentioned Njoku and Engram as top tier tight ends. Gator Raider just landed them, and if you pay attention, that was not even a turn. He landed them 20 picks apart from each other that late in the draft down here, where he got Njoku and Engram. Very interesting value on these tight ends right now.
Yeah, I wonder if it's honestly because we didn't build this as tight end premium. And so people.
Well, I did that on purpose because we finally, in my opinion, tuned into that episode where we called this tight end premium. March 30th was the episode. We debunked that tight end premium doesn't fucking matter. So you don't need to call it that. And as I mentioned a million times, Sleeper does not allow us to have a tight end premium setting where it would noticeably affect their ADP. You're asking drafters to pay attention in a mock draft. Sometimes we can't even get them to show up. So let's not ask them to pay attention. Austin, I want to pivot back to the running backs before I scroll this board a little bit. Actually, you know what? I'm an idiot. I literally just set myself up, Austin, for my keep trade cut and almost missed my opportunity. Austin, let's talk older tight ends. These guys are all 1 year apart from each other. I just talked about 2 of them, and I didn't notice where the other guy went. He went an entire 2 rounds earlier based on age. He is the 30-year-old of this group. I want you to keep trade cut, Austin, David Njoku, Evan Engram, and George Kittle at 30 years old going in the 8th round, 2 full rounds ahead of David Njoku and Evan Engram, who are both younger than him. Keep trade cut, Dynasty, PPR, George Kittle, David Njoku, and Evan Engram.
At first I thought this was going to be easy because I clearly like one of these players more than the others. But then I was like, wait a minute. I need to think with my brain here, not with my heart. Oh, gosh. Okay.
While you're thinking, I have to get Scampers up. Tight end premium sucks.
That's the take. That's going to get all the clicks. Okay. I am going to keep George Kittle.
Whoa.
Because I can't stop. I just love George Kittle so much. I love that he'll get you like a 20-point week. I'm gonna trade. No, I'm gonna trade Evan Engram.
This is the most you've struggled.
I'm gonna trade Evan Engram coming off of tight end 2 in PPR.
Yeah.
Trade him. Say that's selling high because I don't really believe that 143 targets is sustainable for him.
Ooh, certainly doesn't seem so.
And then I'm gonna cut David Njoku because I am just completely out on the Cleveland Browns offense. And like I've talked about it from like a I don't want to root for them perspective, but also I don't think the team's going to be good. Like I worry about the team being bad for fantasy, so I don't want David Njoku. So
you convinced me with your speech there. At first when you said you were keeping Kittle, I thought that was ludicrous. I would keep Engram of this bunch because I simply don't trust the other two. I'll take the L on my trade value. Seeing Kittle go 2 full rounds ahead of the other two, he would have to be my trade because the universe has spoken. He has more value right now. I'm mildly concerned about his age. Very small injury history, but it's not an injury history you can ignore it as he gets to 30 years old. But if they trade away one of these receivers, or if one of these receivers holds out, all of a sudden George Kittle might be the wide receiver 1 next year.
There you go.
So no, that's a really interesting point. God, I said I was going to scroll, but I got to ask you one more question. No, I don't. We're going to scroll. So let's scroll down the draft board here. The draft is not done yet. Gator Raiders is about to time out, and I think this is going to lend itself to talking about who I want to talk about. It does. Austin, I've been trying to fit this into a show literally for months. I went back to some of my old show sheets to look for questions that I have not been able to fit into a show. And I want to talk about how we are treating the older running backs in fantasy football, and specifically in dynasty fantasy football. So you took Derrick Henry, and I'm trying to quickly find the other 4 names that I mentioned here. 3 names rather. Derrick Henry, Nick Chubb, Austin Eckler, Alvin Kamara. These guys are all 28 to 30 years old, which essentially means they are ancient and not worthy. How do we feel about these older running backs? Are they strictly for win now teams, or are there homes for them elsewhere? I mean, obviously you like them. I just noticed you were the one who took Eckler. I am not finding Kamara. Chubb went on the end of Gator Raiders. I just don't see Kamara. Did he go yet? Oh, there he is. 9-4 to Faith. So they all went in a roughly the same. Henry goes first. Henry being the oldest of the bunch. So I'm not going to have you focus much on Henry because I'll have you talk about him during your recap. I want to talk about Nick Chubb. Nick Chubb was averaging over 6 yards per carry before his injury last year. Averages over 5 yards per carry for his career. Goes as the 9-10 here, and it's pretty clear Gator Raiders was building a win now team.
Yeah. So first off, just a heads up, you like totally cut out for a second there. I was like debating whether or not it was me, but you're back now.
Josh just told me the same thing. So
cool. Nick Chubb. I'm avoiding him in all formats right now because Nick Chubb is the perfect type of running back for a win now type of build. There's a good chance he doesn't play most of the season. You might not get him until the fantasy playoffs. And so I think for him specifically, I think this is less about age and more about injury risk. Like he's probably going to be way down the board. Shout out friend of WOFF, Stefan Bell was talking about this on the fantasy football focus. I can't even remember how it goes now, but that ESPN, that other podcast that you should only listen to after you listen to our podcast.
There you go.
She mentioned that she wouldn't be surprised if Nick Chubb doesn't make it back until November, December. And so I do think
I thought he got hurt early enough that we could have expected him back earlier than that.
So the thing, and again, if you want to hear her talk about it with her expertise, go listen to that. But and you do. But what she flagged is that he had a phased surgery for the repair. So he actually had 2 surgeries to repair his knee. And I think part of that has caused some of the time lag of where he's behind where we would have expected him to be based on when the injury occurred. So I'm a little bit nervous on him this year for that reason. Alvin Kamara is a little bit more interesting. I think it is a little bit just more people hating on the older running backs. But I could see him not having as good of a season as last year, just given the fact that he had a lot of receiving upside last year, and that's part of what carried him. And something I don't think that they're going to be in that bad of a situation this year. I think they should be able to kind of spread the ball around more. So I see his ADP falling, but 9th round is still really great value. So I think taking him in a win now build totally makes sense.
Yeah, it's for me who loves these older running backs. It's interesting to me that the spread of these ADPs, that Derrick Henry, who is probably the best for 2024, Derrick Henry goes 4 rounds ahead of some of these guys. And Austin or Alvin Kamara, you pointed out, especially in PPR formats, should be going, I don't want to say ahead of Henry, but he should be going way higher than how we're treating him right now.
Yeah, I think so for sure. Like Kamara, because of the amount of pass volume he gets, like it's worth him being higher up in ADP. And he doesn't. I don't feel like he is like injury prone.
No,
I
doesn't
feel like
certainly seem
he's
that way. He's
suspension
prone.
prone.
Right here, buddy.
But let's see. I mean, I guess he's missed a few games a year. So looking at his game logs, he had 13 starts last year. That was because of his suspension. 15 and 22, 13 and 21. So like he misses a few games here and there, but if you're getting him as your, particularly what Faith did, getting him as the third running back on the team, like that's fine.
Yeah. And Faith, I know, built her team to win now because Faith is very much against trades. She's not trying to win later. She needs to get these players on her team right now. I think that might have been an auto pick. Austin, I didn't realize how late in the show it was. Time flies when you're with good friends having fun drafting. So let's get to your team recap. And I do need to point out, we actually had a question again about your team. Dame was curious to hear our thoughts on Diggs's dynasty value, and you ended up actually drafting Diggs as well. So talk about as much or as little as you want to talk about your team, but if you could mention Stephon Diggs, you would help the audience out a little bit.
Yeah, so I'll start there. I love the value on Stephon Diggs. I think he's still really good. I think he just it was a weird situation in Buffalo. I don't know what all was going on behind the scenes, but clearly he wasn't feeling like he was an important part of the offense. He wasn't feeling like he was getting the ball as much as he should have. And there was an interesting analysis on the Athletic Football Show recently where they discussed how Stephon Diggs was out there not to catch passes all the time. Like he was running routes not to get open. He was running routes to help clear out stuff at times during Buffalo's offense last year during the season. In Houston, that's probably going to change. He's going to be out there trying to actually get open and get passes thrown to him. So I feel like he has a chance to be a big value and bounce back this year.
Yeah, I agree. I want to let you talk about your team more, but I agree that if you're building a win now team, which you very clearly are, I don't know. Oh, the draft ended. I was like, how did it highlight your team? If you're building a win now team, I feel like Diggs is the perfect cog in that machine because at least for the next year, because didn't Houston immediately give him like a 1 year out or like this is a one and done deal basically? So get that dub this year and who cares what happens?
Yeah, exactly. And like, hey, if you ball out, you get paid next year.
Exactly.
He's incentivized to play really well. So after that, I tried to be I tried to wait a long time to start taking running backs and just let the value fall to me, which I feel like happened pretty well. Like getting Derrick Henry, David Montgomery, Austin Eckler, and Jerome Ford, I really like. And the Jerome Ford being that I don't think Nick Chubb is going to play a ton this year. And so getting a running back in Cleveland, not named Nick Chubb, so that I have that if he does end up getting a ton of volume this year. But honestly, the value, I think the ADP for Austin Eckler right now is just sick. Like, did y'all forget he can catch passes?
Yeah.
Like
2 years younger than Derrick Henry. I don't mean to call out your own pick. 2 years younger than Derrick Henry.
Yeah. And he was playing like through a high ankle sprain most of last season, which is really challenging to play for players to go through. So I feel like there's a really easy pathway for him to bounce back. And then outside of that, I just took the receiver value as it fell. And I really like this team. Like I got exposure to good teams, like getting Marquise Brown with Kansas City. And I got exposure to guys who have the potential or already are their number one receivers on their teams, like Mike Evans and Christian Kirk. So overall, I liked how this draft went, getting to just take the value as it fell to me.
Oops of the draft. I don't even know what to call it an oops. I guess it's an oops on all of you, but I'm just going to rewind to say Waddington's team because he was listening and did exactly what we asked. So Marvin Harrison, Garrett Wilson, Kenneth Walker, Zay Flowers, young winning team, Rashad White, George Pickens. Obviously it's a 10-team league. Everybody's team is stacked, but we laughed and we joked and Anthony Richardson went in the 6th round and Trevor Lawrence fell to the 15th round. I understand it's a 1 QB draft, but for the love of God, Trevor Lawrence should not be the last quarterback taken in any draft, let alone a 1 QB draft. That is your oops of the draft, everybody. Austin, thank you so much. 2 weeks in a row now, you carry the show. We very, very much appreciate it. Tell everybody where they can find you, what you're working on.
Yeah, first off, you can follow me on Twitter and Instagram at Austin_FFL. And I am straight in best ball season. We have our best ball podcast, our second best ball podcast planning to start soon. I'm working on some best ball content that'll be posted on the website at some point. I'm not telling you when because that's the point of a teaser and it's what keeps you coming back and watching these shows. Other than that, you can get all of my Carolina Panthers coverage at Last Word on NFL.
Perfect. Guys, listen, Club Fantasy appreciates each and every one of you guys. We just recently crossed 1,000 followers. And if you enjoyed the content here, we'd be happy if you liked, commented, tell us down below if you got an ad. I think we're still trying to get ads turned on, so you probably didn't, but let us know if you got one. Like, comment, all the things that's going to help us grow. And if you haven't subscribed, click the damn button. We literally go live 5 times a week. We cover redraft, we cover dynasty, we cover best ball, and we do mock drafts to help you get better at all of these different types of fantasy football. There is no reason for you not to subscribe. We're going to be back Monday night with Mocking with the Stars with Jay and Chris. I forgot to ask Jay who he's dealing with this week, and I know he was busy this morning, but it's going to be a great show. It's going to be an excellent way to spend your Memorial Day. On Wednesday, we continue our Look Inside series. We're going to have the Patriots, Chargers, and Giants, and Andrew Cooper from Fantasy Alarm is our guest. And for the last time on this episode, make sure that you sign up for Dynasty Nerds if you are looking to improve your Dynasty managerial skills. 15% off when you use Club Fantasy. Always remember, defense wins championships, offense wins fantasy football, and practice makes perfect. We will see you next week.